Hey guys, Levelcap here, and today I want to give you my first impressions of Battlefield 2042. I was invited to an early capture session to play the various modes of the game, and as per a signed NDA embargo agreement, I do need to say this video is made possible by the EA Creator Network. However, I am not required or being paid by EA to make any content, and my opinions shared here are my own. Also, these are first impressions and not a full review, which I will be releasing at a later date once I'm neck deep in the post-launch experience of Battlefield 2042. And while my initial impressions are mostly based on 12 hours of launch build playtime, there were many limitations to how I was able to play the game at this time and things that ultimately prevented me from forming a complete picture of what a launch experience may feel like. Some of the things that I will not be able to comment on because I didn't get to try them were the smaller modes like Team Deathmatch, and also a lot of the base game mode experiences that I played like Conquest and Breakthrough were fought against teams that consisted of a lot of bots, so it took away my ability to judge balance. I especially noticed this during the beta that when playing against real players versus playing against bots, the flow of a match felt very different. Also, I was playing the game in a non-server stressed environment, so I can't comment on how the game holds up under what is bound to be an extreme population stress of launch week. Now, the progression and achievements were also unlocked, so I can't really comment too much on progression flow, so just keep that in mind that while watching my first impressions, my experience so far is still a little bit incomplete. That being said, one of the reasons for having a less complete experience is the sheer wealth of content in Battlefield 2042. In 12 hours of playtime, I feel like I barely scratched the surface of what you can do in this game. And as a Battlefield veteran, I feel comfortable in saying that the stuff to do in this game far exceeds that of any past Battlefield by a significant margin. Breakthrough and Conquest on 7 massive maps with 128 players will simply take hundreds of hours to become familiar with, and that in itself is a small fraction of the entire experience. 2042 is massive, especially regarding the square kilometers available for you to play on. Now, if I were to compartmentalize 2042's experience and first start off with the basic aspect of Battlefield, focusing on Breakthrough and Conquest, I would say first off that it feels like Battlefield, but a little less intimate, if you would even consider the previous games to be intimate shooters. Doubling the player count and blowing up the map size changes important elements in the flow of a match. Firstly, the increased scale is very impressive visually. Looking off into the distance and seeing a massive frontline firefight light up your screen is a truly cinematic spectacle. The average match gameplay looks like you're playing a trailer with friendlies and enemies in every direction. Tanks rolling by and helicopters doing low flybys. It almost feels like you're playing a staged event, but it truly isn't. This really is a massive battle, and you're just one soldier trying to make your way through it. Now, the second major divergence from previous Battlefield games that comes to mind is, for, well, lack of a better term, combat spread. With 128 players on a single map, combat is everywhere. Even the smaller battles and point captures usually involve clearing out at least a few enemies, and the larger ones can be intense, prolonged firefights of 20 to 30 players. Gone are the days of solo capturing objectives in a buggy. You better show up with at least a squad, maybe 2, and be prepared to fight if you want to get that capture point. It definitely does away with that annoying ghost cap mechanic that I never enjoyed from previous Battlefield games and puts a much bigger emphasis on strength and numbers. The saturation of combat does change the flow of the game a bit, and the size of the map makes it hard to memorize a lot of nuanced cover areas to develop your favorite spots, but I look at this as more of a positive. I'd actually be curious to play some of these standard maps in a 64 player size version and see how it plays out by comparison. You certainly feel less impactful in the bigger mode, but that might be a good thing if you want to feel less significant compared to the whole team. Now, the maps are simply gorgeous. It's undeniable just how good they look, aside from certain areas of, say, Hourglass looking a bit weird. Granted, I don't know what a city covered in a sandstorm should look like, but it does feel a bit off at times. Visually, it really is an insane looking game, and while my performance was mostly stable, the FPS certainly wasn't worth bragging about. Hopefully there'll be some good optimization guides coming out to try and squeeze every last bit of FPS out of this game, because if my monster PC is struggling to hit 100 FPS, then I can only imagine what a lesser computer is going to do, let alone consoles. Now, of course, the new class system, or rather lack of a class system, the specialists, are still in the game. DICE still technically has the label of Assault, Support, Recon, and Engineer in game, but they don't really mean much anymore. Instead, you really just have to think of your specialist as a specialty gadget selection and perhaps a passive perk to go with it. Beyond that, you're free to pick any weapon, grenade, or standard gadget that you want. It's a really weird downgrade that the community has pretty much universally crucified DICE for implementing, but it's so deeply integrated to Battlefield at this point that I doubt it's going to be changing anytime soon. It's really hard to say how badly this will hurt the meta of the base game in the long run. In the short term, I've mostly managed to ignore it, but it doesn't feel right not knowing who's a sniper, a machine gunner with ammo, anti-vehicle classes, etc. It's all kind of chaotic now, and I think it ultimately will hurt the teamwork not knowing who can do what on the battlefield. That being said, some of the new specialists that weren't playable in the beta are interesting. In fact, I was surprised that most of them didn't play out in the cheesy ways that I thought they would. For example, Dozer with his massive ballistic shield is quite useful. There's plenty of open fields and long distances to cross while taking fire. He excels here and is the perfect class for pushing up and taking new ground. He can also reflect shots back at players and melee them with his shield, but ultimately closing the distance is going to be his specialty. Now, Jisoo is also way less powerful than I initially thought she would be. She may be very useful for clearing buildings or weeding out the last few stragglers hiding on a point, but in between close quarter combat, her ability is basically useless. And there's a lot of long-range combat in this game, so she's going to be very circumstantial. Sundance's wingsuit, although it looks awesome, is extremely hard to operate, much more so than I thought it was going to be. Plus, the opportunities to actually use it are infrequent, so a lot of practice and aerial transport support will hopefully make it better, but ultimately she seems very situational. Her grenades are cool, but not something that feels overly powerful. I really don't see Sundance getting a lot of use since her best ability is essentially transportation. Who knows, maybe a squad of Sundances that can get around objectives or get good flanks will be really valuable. Navin Rao, aka the Hacker, seems like he could be a potential anti-vehicle expert. Hacking infantry seems borderline useless, with teammates killing your target before completing a hack, or just getting killed yourself before you can complete the hack. However, hacking an air vehicle disables all of their weapons and countermeasures for a limited period of time, and then you can hit it with lock-on missiles easy. I was able to solo kill an Apache doing so, and I would imagine it's pretty similar for ground vehicles while going in for, say, a C4 kill after hacking a tank. Angel, or Angel's ability, is extremely useful. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he just becomes the meta operator. He can distribute armor and ammo by throwing packs and even call in a full resupply station that lets you swap out your kit. When he revives people, they also get armor upon the revive. His abilities certainly aren't quite as fancy as some of the other specialists, but he's going to be a top pick, especially considering that armor is crazy powerful, giving you an extra 20 hit points. Plus, he can do all of this while carrying a rocket launcher to boot, so I mean, what's not to like? Now, Irish's deployable shield felt pretty underwhelming. It might be useful while defending certain objectives, but ultimately it makes you a target, especially for vehicles and anyone with heavy munitions, so I'm expecting him to be an unpopular pick. Now, one area of the game that people are certainly going to criticize is the lack of base game weapons. Despite DICE boasting about 70 plus launch weapons, many of them are integrated in the Portal experience. There's only about 22 guns to use in the base game, and that's including the sidearms. It's quite possibly the reason that you can actually use all the guns for all the specialists, since there would otherwise be so little variety to pick from. I mean, there's literally only 2 machine guns in the base game. I don't know how this is going to hold up with the progression system that DICE has also boasted about. Luckily, there are a decent amount of camos prepped and ready to go for unlocks, but I do hope that DICE has more guns and skins ready to inject into the game quickly, or I think the lack of variety might start to wear thin. Now, as for the progression system, as I mentioned earlier, everything was unlocked for my play session, though I was gaining levels and unlocks were popping up on screen when I played, but I just wasn't really paying attention to the pacing of it since I wasn't weapon restricted restricted or attachment restricted in any way. This is something I'll certainly be paying much more attention to in my full review. Now, despite the lack of guns, they do actually feel quite good. Sniping is much more enjoyable compared to how it felt in the beta experience, especially on breakthrough modes where there's an insane target saturation. I think top tier snipers are especially going to have a field day on breakthrough. Every class of weapon seems to feel pretty distinct and have a place on the battlefield, though I didn't really use a shotgun too much in the base game. I think perhaps pairing one with Dozer, who allows me to close the distance, could be a cool combination, but I just didn't really think of trying that while I was playing. Now, of course, Battlefield 2042 is so much more than just the base game. It's also slapped together with two entirely different experiences, Hazard Zone and Portal. And although Battlefield 2042 has been largely marketed as 3 distinct game modes, you may want to consider it more like 2 worthwhile game modes, as Hazard Zone, well, just don't got it. And for anyone not familiar with Hazard Zone, it is an extraction royale squad-based experience, and it's boring. I hate to say it, but if you were holding out any hope of this mode competing with Warzone, or at least giving you a new extraction royale to hold your attention, well, you're probably out of luck. I can see why DICE's marketing really didn't show much gameplay from this mode because, well, there's not really much to show. Personally, I was done with the experience after playing it for about an hour. It kind of feels like a computer pulled data from popular search algorithms and compiled a mode that was designed to hit on all of the battle royale trends and then pooped out a soulless rendition of what that should be. And I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but honestly, Battlefield 5's Firestorm was 10 times better than this mode, and DICE dropped support for that mode basically a few months after launch. So it almost feels like a waste of breath to point out the flaws in this mode, since I'm 99% sure that nobody's going to be playing it in a few weeks' time, if it even lasts that long. But who knows, on the off chance that I am wrong, let's at least address some of the problems with this mode. A big flaw with it is that the mode has a complete lack of economic reward or punishment. A single victory can get you fully kitted for like 4 to 5 games, and considering that there's only 8 teams total with 2 chances of victory per match, then statistically, you should be running fully kitted most of the time that you play. It takes away the fear of dying. Even if you bring your best kit into a match, the loss never feels particularly impactful, where something like Tarkov or Hunt Showdown has an intense fear element. Hazard Zone is much more carefree. And this is not a good thing since these modes are supposed to be heart-pounding and intense. It's part of what makes these types of games so good to stream. I can't see anybody watching Hazard Zone for the nail-biting situations. Also, the damage profiles are identical to the base game, so players die very fast, which feels off, and also squad synergy seems more or less non-existent. Just make sure that somebody has ammo and armor and you're more or less good to go. The flow of a match is also odd, to put it kindly. Basically, you just need to make sure that at least 1 or 2 people brings a scanner gadget into the match, and then you scan for data drives, and then you go get them and fight AI or enemy players along the way. The scanner gadget is unfortunately not fun and is basically busy work. It just requires that somebody in your squad sacrifice one of their gadgets so that you can find data drives. It seems like you could have easily made this mode more enjoyable by just having data drives show up on the mini-map, as the scanner just doesn't really add any sort of fun, rewarding mechanic. Instead, it just forces somebody to constantly scan stuff, which, in my opinion, doesn't bring anything positive to the mode. The AI that you'll run into in the mode are annoying at best. They aren't taken too seriously, and there isn't a massive incentive to be quiet and remain hidden. They certainly don't bring in any sort of tactical or fun element that a game like, say, Hunt Showdown would. Now, on top of all this, the rounds are very short, which doesn't give you the sense of any sort of big adventure, and there's even an early game extraction, which seems so ridiculous. Who wants to actually bail on a game mode a few minutes after it starts? I don't really understand this mechanic or the choice for it. And unfortunately, there's almost no innovation in this mode. It only borrows from other modes that have more or less done everything better than Hazard Zone does. If you're looking for an extraction royale, go play Hunt Showdown, go play Tarkov, or the other 5-ish games out there that all do this but significantly better. Anyway, I'm sorry to report that Hazard Zone is a big letdown. It's even more painful for me considering that I enjoyed Firestorm, DICE's previous Battle Royale attempt, and well, they just didn't give it the attention it deserved. I personally would have much rather seen a second attempt at Firestorm, since the circle mechanic in that game was at least really fun and interesting, and the destruction of the environment brought a whole new element to the Battle Royale experience. But alas, we just have to deal with the fact that DICE just doesn't seem to be able to make any sort of Battle Royale or Extraction Royale experience in any sort of competent manner. Now, moving on to Portal. It's kind of hard to know where to start with going over Portal because, well, it's sort of an infinite system capable of generating endless content. That being said, I didn't get to experience the full power of Portal during my play session. We played a few custom free-for-all modes that were, in all honesty, pretty miserable experiences. One of the modes was kind of a demo in how to make a mode where everyone would spawn in with a rocket launcher that only had one shot. In order to reload that rocket launcher, you had to jump 5 times. It was fine in the sense that it showed you how you could start modifying a game mode to have weird rules, but you can also imagine how unfun that mode ultimately was. I was much more hoping to be able to play an Infection style zombie mode or a gun game style mode. Luckily though, DICE did reveal in a private Q&A session that both Infection and gun games are possible to create in Portal and have already been played internally and people enjoy them. So despite them not showing off those modes in the previous section, they will be possible along with plenty of other ideas. I just think DICE really kind of dropped the marketing ball here on showing off what Portal can actually do, and hopefully we'll just see all of the awesome stuff it can do post-launch. Now, what was extremely cool were the classic Portal modes recreating Battlefield 1942, Bad Company 2, and Battlefield 3. These experiences were simply amazing and a total nostalgia trip for any fan of the franchise. It's also a great way for somebody to experience Battlefield 1942 who's never played it, but in a remastered sort of way, and also relive some of the best hits of Bad Company and Battlefield 3. I absolutely want to see more of this classic content coming back in the future, and it will be without question a highlight for fans of the franchise. Now, of course, to be totally fair, these modes were a little bit limited. Not every single weapon from Battlefield 3 was brought back, but certainly enough to recreate the feeling of the game, and it holds up amazingly well. It's pretty cool to see what Battlefield 3 looks like on the modern engine. Heck, even Bad Company 2's maps look totally stunning. And the gameplay itself is recreated in all that classic glory. You can really go back and feel like you're playing Bad Company 2, but just with incredible visuals. Plus, Portal is going to let you tweak things a little bit, so if you want some of the more modern things integrated into your Bad Company 2 experience, like side strafing while you sprint, well, you can do that. Or maybe the ability to go prone. You could also add that in if you just want to update the experience a little bit more to your liking. I honestly can't wait to join servers that just rotate between the modern game, classic Battlefield 1942, Bad Company 2, and Battlefield 3. I mean, we were playing Rush on Bad Company 2 and it felt like Rush on Bad Company 2. It was awesome. Like, having that thrown into a normal server mixture is going to be such an amazing experience, and I can't wait for that to be the new standard of Battlefield. Now, overall, there's been a ton of positives with the experience, but there's also been quite a few negatives. I still really miss the classic scoreboard showing how many players are on a server and where I rank among them. It seems very intentional that DICE are trying to avoid this type of ranking comparison, and it's a real shame and honestly totally unnecessary. It's an incredibly valuable tool to check team balance and better understand how you're performing as a player. The next element that I don't think works out so well is the gun customization system being integrated with the Plus system. It ends up becoming a real chore when you actually want to modify your Plus menu. You have to back out into a bunch of back menus, find your gun, and then go through the tedious process of swapping items around. It's honestly kind of hard to explain. You'll just have to wait till you get to that aspect of the game for yourself, but it's absolutely not fun, and it makes me not want to further experiment with attachments and just leave my Plus system alone. And frankly, it makes me wish for just the simpler days of Battlefield 4's menu system where weapon modding could be relatively straightforward. Ultimately, I think the sacrifices made to the user interface just to add in a Plus system may not be worth it in the long run. Now, in general, I try to avoid balance talk too much at the start of a Battlefield game just because well, things are usually way out of balance, and that's almost to be expected. But in general, vehicles are extremely powerful. Now, I'm sure that infantry are going to learn better how to fight against them, especially considering that like a hacker is a very effective tool against them, and I didn't see too many people hacking vehicles. But at the moment, if I want to absolutely dominate a server, I can just hop into a helicopter and go on a 30 kill streak, no problem. And I really just don't like knowing that if I want to grind XP, I should really be hopping into a tank or a helicopter. I like playing infantry, but I also like ranking up. Now I'm being conflicted with wanting to gain experience at a decent rate and not wanting to just play helicopters and tanks all day. And even the light vehicles are crazy powerful. I mean, wait till you guys get into a hovercraft. It looks like a tiny little transport vehicle, but it's extremely hard to take one of these things down. They're highly mobile and their weapons are crazy powerful. We'll have to wait and see how this balance plays out with anti-vehicle meta, but my initial impression is that vehicles are OP AF. And that shouldn't be the case, in my opinion. I think there should be a much better balance of power between vehicles and infantry. Now, speaking of vehicles, there still isn't a separate set of controls for helicopters and jets. This is totally insane to me. The two vehicles in real life control differently, and in game, I use different pitch and yaw control between the two vehicles in previous battlefields. I don't know why DICE thought that after 10 plus years of separate controls for them, they could just combine them together. I sincerely hope that DICE brings back separate controls because I don't want to have to completely relearn how to fly with a different set of controls for either helicopter or jet. I can keep one the same, but the other one's going to have to change drastically. Also, regarding vehicles, in the classic Portal experience, I found a considerable amount of vehicle sights that were completely off target and felt unfinished. Hopefully these sightline issues can get patched quickly. Now on the plus side, I did not notice anywhere near as many bugs from the beta experience of the game. Things felt much more polished. Granted, some of the people I was playing with did crash on occasion, and other people were reporting some visual artifacts and performance issues. There's certainly going to be some performance issues at launch, but I just wasn't experiencing anywhere near as much compared to beta, and it felt pretty decently polished for the most part. Now overall, there is a wealth of content here to explore further. Portal seems like it's going to be a massive win in the long run. The classic stuff is absolutely amazing. I definitely want more of it, and although I haven't really been able to explore the custom games properly, I think it will develop a life of its own. The base game is also pretty darn fun and absolutely beautiful, and honestly, I just need to play it more to fully suss out its balance and potential. There are, without question, design choices that I don't like Specialists, but simply put, I don't know the long-term effects of those choices, and only time will tell if there are bumps in the road or major roadblocks to the future of Battlefield. But to give you a more conclusive opinion on that, I'll just have to save it for my full review, which is probably a week or two away. Until then, good luck to EA with the launch of the game. I hope the servers are stable, and I'll see you all on the battlefield. This is Levelcap, signing off.